In facial beauty, attractiveness is largely based on averageness. We are drawn to symmetry, balanced features, and proportionate ratios. This was proved in a recent study where scientists morphed faces and analyzed the participants' response to the perceived attractiveness in these faces. They concluded that faces morphed towards the average were perceived as more attractive, and those morphed away from the average were perceived as less attractive. In fact, 75% of participants rated the average morph face as the most attractive, and interestingly enough, this preference for averageness transcends the human race and was noted in fish, dogs, and even birds. In terms of biological differences, males and females are both attracted to sexual dimorphism, features that differentiate males and females. Dimorphism was important to judgments of attractiveness and personality in ancestral environments and carries on to the modern time. This hypothesis, again, is proved by a study which found significant correlations between femininity and attractiveness of a woman as ranked by men. In this study, women aged 18 to 24 were morphed on a femininity-masculinity scale by adding or subtracting 50% of the linear difference between a 40 adult male composite face and the 40 adult female composite face. 1,972 males rated the morphs and preferred the feminine morphs over the masculine ones and the original. There is a relevance to this introductory discussion on dimorphism because there are faces that can lie on either end of the extreme and balance each other out. One example is a famous fashion model called Tsunaina. Born in Tibet, Tsunaina rose through fame and notoriety and stunned the fashion industry due to a unique look. While at first glance, her look is hard to characterize, it's apparent that her uniqueness comes from a mix of Western and Eastern beauty standards. The first thing that we notice about her are the robust masculine features. When classifying masculine features, we must first look at the male dimorphic characteristics. Sexually dimorphic features are defined as features which are different in men and women due to the different genetic buildup and hormones during development. These are features which are determined by hormone levels such as estrogen, testosterone, and dihydrotestosterone, which influence growth prenatally all the way up to puberty. This is what causes the apparent bone structure differences between the two genders. To start off, Tsunaina has a very broad, wide face. Her facial width to height ratio, a quantifiable ratio which compares the vertical length of the face to the horizontal length, is approximately 1.85. High facial width to height ratio is influenced by androgens, specifically testosterone. The healthy range of testosterone for males comes to about 200 to 1000 nanograms per deciliter, and for females 50 to 70, showing a very large disparity. So it's unsurprising that this feature shows up on males more often. In another study, facial width to height ratio was used as a scientific indicator of aggressive behavior, assertiveness, and dominance, and it could be part of why in the Eastern beauty standard, women with broad, wide faces are often seen as arrogant and stubborn, even when that's not the case. With Tsunaina's ratio of 1.84, her face is broader than most male icons such as Bradley Cooper at 1.74 and almost as much as Brad Pitt himself at 1.93. Further analyzing her lower third, we see her wide mandible and ramus contribute to her square, angular jawline. Her chin is also quite square rather than rounded, and all of these features lead to a robust, yet masculine, lower third. Another feature that we can observe are her hollow cheeks. Hollow cheeks are caused through the combination of prominent zygomatic bones, or your cheekbones, and very little buccal tissue between the mandible. Women generally store more facial fat due to gynoid fat distribution, which is caused by estrogen. Secondly, high levels of estrogen cause water retention, which may contribute to having a bloated look in some faces despite being very lean. But this is obviously not the case here, as the bone mass on her face is very high, which looks masculine as males generally have more bone size, mass, and volume, especially in the face. Therefore, through the combination of all of these factors, we can see her hollow cheeks with a combination of a prominent zygos and little fat in the buccal area, which creates a very attractive OG curve. Although she has a lot of masculine features, she still looks feminine and attractive. Normally, as both genders prefer average dimorphic faces, this may be seen as a flaw. However, this is where Tsunaina's face is truly unique. The presence of these hypermasculine features are not a flaw because they are balanced out and complemented by her hyperfeminine features. The first thing that jumps out are her extremely wide and full lips. Just like the jaw, lips are dimorphic, however, rather than by testosterone, they are influenced by estrogen. This is supported by a study which not only found a correlation between femininity and lip size, but concluded that women's larger, fuller lips developed under the influence of higher levels of estrogen. This same study noted that not only were the size of the lips dimorphic, but even the color, by allowing the participants to manipulate the color of the lips, and found that increased redness correlated to increased femininity and reduced redness enhanced the masculine aspects of the face. Even though her lips aren't proportionally perfect, with the upper and lower lip ratio at 1.25 rather than the ideal 1.618, the size makes them so much more appealing. However, the reason that it doesn't look unnatural compared to other people with lips of her size is because they exist in combination with extremely pronounced masculine features. In essence, they are needed to bring balance and to provide femininity in an otherwise masculine face. Without her huge lips, she would simply look too masculine. It's also worth noting how her lips curl upwards because she has so much vermilion mass, but as her lips are natural, they have an even consistency, and those who try to achieve this with lip fillers often tend to have the fish lip effect because it doesn't match their mouth width. Her high cheekbones are also extremely prominent. High cheekbones are especially desirable in females. In a study from the Journal of Cosmetic Dermatology, 20,000 individuals were surveyed about facial preferences, and all chose high cheekbones as attractive in females. Researchers hypothesized that high cheekbones are a defining factor of high estrogen levels in women. High cheekbones are also wide, and at their widest part are slightly broader than the mandible. This means that despite her well-developed jaw, her cheekbones are still broader than the ramus, which creates a tapered aesthetic look. The difference is visible where the red lines indicate the zygoma and the white lines indicate the ramus. This gives her cheeks a very pronounced OG curve and is part of the prerequisite in having a hollow cheek look, where, as explained in Bella Hadid's video, some people just cannot develop one regardless of how lean their buccal region is. To visually show this, Powell et al.'s method of measuring malar prominence shows that her cheekbones are laterally projected outwards instead of forwards, as is ideal. Also, transverse proportion wise, something that people might miss in terms of adding masculinity is how close her eyes are to the outer facial border. This gives her eyes a dominant aggressive look as they're positively inclined downwards at the ideal canthal angle and very vertically narrow with strong lower eyelid support. The only quote-unquote flaw would be her epicanthal fold, which is explained in the Eastern Beauty Standards video. Asian women felt that it made them appear weary and tired. Something worth mentioning is how thin her neck is. This thin neck accentuates her jawline and lowers her mentocervical angle, which makes her face look leaner. The neck is a muscle and therefore usually smaller and less developed in females. Even though males rarely train this muscle, the size differences are drastic because the neck has a high percentage of androgen receptors and its size is greatly influenced by hormones. This lower third angularity contrasts heavily with her upper third roundness, as rounded foreheads are seen as a neotenous feminine facial trait. With a high hairline, what might appear as a disproportionately large forehead on anyone else, hers is perfectly balanced by facial thirds. The biggest prerequisite to having a modeling face is having ideal lateral and vertical proportions, as is the case here. Lastly, let's talk about the most salient aspect of her face, the nose. The nose tip is slightly wide, which makes her nose to mouth ratio at 1.3, which is less than the ideal 1.61. This ideal was noted in the same study which claimed 1.61 for ideal upper to lower lip. However, this shouldn't be confused with disproportion, as her nasal base is actually spot on at the correct width, being in line with the inner eye corners. The nasal base itself has a unique teardrop shape with a somewhat plunging nose tip, which isn't common in Eastern Asian women, but is a common feature in Upper South Asian ones, such as Nepal and Tibet, which is where she is ethnically from. While many Central and East Asian women typically have a flat nasal bridge and nasion, Tsunaina's is much wider than average. In 1986, Cunningham et al. Proposed the central face theory, finding that central facial features such as the nose, eyes, and chin are much more important for attraction than peripheral ones such as the cheekbones, ears, and hair. In the West, wide and masculine features are celebrated on both men and women, whereas Eastern standards overwhelmingly prefer oval face shapes, which Tsunaina definitely doesn't have. Take Lucy Liu for example, who has wide masculine features that are desired in the West, but in the East it's seen as a sign of being a stubborn person. With Tsunaina having a unique nasal contour paired with very dimorphic feminine lips, in a sense they cancel out to create a very polarizing face. A good example of this effect is another model, Gao Qizhen, who not too long ago sparked controversy for aesthetically misrepresenting Chinese beauty. You may argue that modeling standards fetishize non-standard features on Asian women, but in general, faces that have polarizing aspects sell the most clothes as they're the most memorable. Institutions like Anti-Agency pride themselves on scouting unique faces and have carved out a niche in the industry as the go-tos for iconoclastic taste. What might be a flaw to some only acts as a unique selling point, as her skin is clear, jaw is developed, and proportions are harmonious. For someone with such strong bone structure, it's unsurprising that they would have strong symmetry. As covered in our symmetry video, asymmetry at the jaw is most common, with 75% of cases being in the lower third. However, as you can see in this morph, her lower third is mostly ideal, which puts her in a model tier category, as a large portion of the population has some form of dental malocclusion. The only real point of asymmetry is at the uppermost hairline, which is perfectly normal, and slight contour shifts in her nasal bridge, which is only noticeable from an angle. While on the channel we've covered examples of unconventionally attractive faces, there's nothing quite like hers. It's incredibly proportionate with over-exaggerated dimorphic elements from the masculine eye shape to the noticeable jaw and facial width. On the other hand, she has feminine elements that women in both the East and West have tried to emulate for years, with larger-than-life lips, smooth porcelain skin, and a juvenile rounded forehead. Her features and proportions closely resemble current-day Angelina Jolie, who also has an equally strong jaw with a rounded upper third. The current paradigm in modeling standards seems to prefer cases of unconventional beauty with social pressures of greater inclusivity, but don't be fooled into thinking that her unconventional nose shape is why she is successful in modeling. Fetal hydantoin syndrome gives a very similar nasal bridge and nose structure to hers, but those children don't all become successful models. If you would like to get your facial aesthetic analyzed, you can purchase a report at the Couv's site, and if you've enjoyed the content and would like your favorite person in the next video, be sure to subscribe and comment down below.